In this video, we're going to be checking out the new NECA toys, Ash vs. the Evil Dead, Henrietta. Henrietta makes a return not only to Ash vs. the Evil Dead, but also to figure form, as this is technically the second Henrietta that we've received. So ugly, I guess they had to make her twice. She does come with what looks now to be a stand and some pretty cool looking accessories. Before we have a look at those accessories, however, let's figure out how tall the new Henrietta is. She's about 6 1/4 inches in height. One of the new additions to this figure release is she comes with this new display stand. Colored, or I should say molded in black plastic with one singular non-adjustable neck. There is a rather odd off-circled shape on the top there, more like a crescent or half moon shape, and then that actually just fits on the back here. Just plug it into place like so, and you can have Henrietta floating. You can probably get a little bit more creative than what I've just done here, but at the very least you can see how you can have the figure not just simply standing, but also levitating as well. Her other accessories we'll get into in a second. Kind of save that for near the end of the review. We want to spend some time first looking at Henrietta, who now makes, again, a return appearance to the Ash vs. Evil Dead. Kind of excited that she came back. Figure here is just as grotesque as the one that we had looked at before. A mass of flesh that's been decaying, rotting. Well, she's definitely seen better days. Looking at the face first and foremost, it's got a nice slickness to it. Oh, just covered in what either would be sweat, slime, or mucus. Who knows? But the face does have this kind of wet effect done to it. It doesn't seem like it gets anywhere more of that anywhere in the rest of the body. The body instead seems very matte by comparison. The coloring also seems slightly off, where the head is of the lighter, almost more living sort of flesh, where again the rest of the body is slightly off the color. It's not quite the same coloring. I wish that this color had actually carried its way over. I mean, I guess you could chalk it up to the fact that the body is decayed, so it would be slightly an off color. But at the very least, I would hope that the color had matched the actual head here. At the very least, though, I would have loved more of this kind of sheen, the clear coat added to the rest of the body. So just so the whole body looked like a sweaty, messy mess, as opposed to the body just being very dry and neutral here. It's not to say that the body isn't super detailed, and by super detailed I mean incredibly gross and, like I said, decayed, especially like the back end of her. There's just a whole lot missing on the back of Henrietta here. It's gross, it's disgusting. Certainly would not have it any other way. I don't even know what I've done with my other Henrietta, because I really did want to display, or at least for the very least for this review, have her side by side with her former counterpart. That figure, at the time that I shot the review of that Henrietta, I commented that that was an insanely gross looking figure. I feel almost as if this figure could have been trumped by this Henrietta, because, well, it does benefit from, I think, some additional articulation, which I don't think the other figure, I'd have to go back and look at it again if I can eventually find it. I don't know if the other figure had as much going for it as this one does here. The articles of clothing, few and far between, barely cover over the very gross nature of her body here. There are some few rips and tearaways, but there again, there's very little holding on fabric-wise to her body here. You get the decayed, basically from the head all the way down. It's just nothing but gross, just old, rotting flesh that, again, really nicely done. Could have afforded, I think, better paint, is about the only thing. They put in the kind of this off greenish gray to kind of fill in the recessed areas. But at the very least, I would have loved this kind of slicked, as I've already mentioned, this kind of sheen added to the rest of the body. I think that's about the only thing I would have done differently to the figure. Peg holes on the undersides of the feet. To be honest, though, the figure stands perfectly fine. I don't have any issues whatsoever with her. Before we talk about her other heads, one thing that's neat is that they've given a doll hairstyle to her, or doll hair to her. I do notice, though, that one patch of hair, this hair right here, the one that probably is sticking out like a sore thumb, has been, I guess, accidentally glued, because it looks like it's glued to the bottom of the neck area here, and as a result, it's sticking up amongst, well, the normal straight hairs. It's a nice effect by incorporating like fake hair, or like doll hair, to a plastic sculpted figure, as opposed to just using plastic sculpted hair. It can make or break a figure, and I happen to think it works and makes this figure. Whereas if they had made this plastic, I don't think it would have gotten the same effect. Especially the very thin fibrous hairs, like the very wispy sort of hairs, I don't think could have been done as well if these were sculpted in plastic. Okay, so let's talk about her other heads. To do that, we're going to go ahead and pop the head off the socket area here, which is a little tricky because it's got this big bulbous head. What's neat, though, is when you take off the head, you're immediately treated to a severed stump. Of course, again, for not excluding the ball joint on the top here. I think what they might have also been able to do, too, I would not go in and try to remove the ball joint, but at the very least, they should have painted the ball joint the same color as the open socket area here, that blood red. Just so, I mean, from a distance, you can clearly tell there's a ball joint there, but at the very least, if they had painted it the same color, you could really have left Henrietta's head off, and it would still look as if it would somewhat look like it's been cut right off. So then you can go ahead and replace it with this rather long neck. And similar to the original figure that we looked at with Henrietta, this is a wire frame. So you can go ahead and take the socket area here, plug it into the ball joint, which is a lot easier than this head is to put back into its socket. And you have what I can only describe as looking like, it looks like the trunk of an elephant. That is until we add this extra head, which has the same rooted doll hair as the other head that, well, this head right here, we'll do the comparison right there. This head here reminds me of something I wanted to talk about with this head, and I just completely forgot, is I love the blank, dead eyes. They almost have like a gray, sort of gray shadowed effect to it. It's almost like a translucent, even though I'm sure it's only been painted, but it does give it the sense that it actually looks like something you could look into it, or it could light up if it wanted to. A nice contrast of the two different heads. This head here does look like it does have a hinge on the mouth, which is just a little stiffer to get open there. But it does look like there is a hinge. There we go. There we go. It's just a little bit on the stiff side. Get that mouth completely open. Very gruesome, very grotesque. Get the tongue sculpted on the interior and the serrated teeth as well sticking out from the very gross looking gum area there. Now what you can do is you can either leave the head completely off, which is why they've also bloodied the stump of the neck here, the very end of the neck. You can leave it off as if the head has been cut clean off. Or what you can also do too is there's that little hole on the top where you can connect it to the peg that's at the top of the neck area here. By this also being a wire frame, you can move the neck down. Unfortunately, because this is a denser, bigger area here, there's less wiggle room, so to speak, where you can actually bend the neck down. So you can really only hinge it more so here, more so at the top area here, and it kind of starts giving you resistance right around here. I suppose a workaround to that, you could heat up the material, the rubber here, just to soften it a bit, so it may add for a little bit more flexibility. But it's a nice looking effect if you want to display Henrietta going this route rather than this head here. This is more of the traditional head, I like to think, But again, you've got the options going either way. Articulation, we'll go ahead and pop this head off and replace this head here. The articulation on Henrietta, head rotates all the way around via the ball joint that we just finished looking at. You've also got a rock back and forth and a hinge up and down, so you can really move the head any which way. Arms, the very gross, just rotting arms can be hinged outward, as well as you can rotate them technically all the way around, but I mean, you get a lot of resistance starting to happen when it gets bunched up around the material here. But you can rotate them all the way around. She's got a hinge at the elbow, which also allows the rotation in the forearm, and a rotation happening in the hand, which you've also got the hinge back and forth. Upper torso ball joint right underneath the top portion of Henrietta. The legs hinge outward, slightly forward and back, not really a whole lot happening here. It's interesting that the way that they've kind of layered the different sculpts happening here, that you got a big slice down at the bottom area here. But a hinge down below at the knee, again, those legs can rotate all the way around, and you can also rotate the feet all the way around and hinge those up and down as well. Certainly, it is one of the grossest looking figures that I have reviewed. I actually thought it couldn't get any grosser when I had a look at Henrietta the first time around, and yet somehow gets trumped when we have a look at the new released Henrietta. And actually, just before we wrap up this video, if you guys want to see how Henrietta stacks next to the Asylum Ash, there he is right there next to her. A little bit smaller is the new Henrietta, a little much more bulbous, and much, might I also add, much grosser as well. Final looks often gives me a chance to mention some stuff that I may have overlooked during the course of this review. And one thing actually came to my mind as I put her back on the display stand, and I want to actually express here in the last looks of the figure. If you do rotate the top torso, the top right underneath the armpit, that ball joint area, it does cut off. In fact, you're looking at it right now, you're cutting off slightly the hole in which the peg of the neck adjusts itself into. So if you do twist the torso any which way past looking forward, it doesn't look as if you can actually put the neck of the actual stand into the hole. So you may need to ultimately keep that torso always straight for it to fit in place. Really a nice looking representation of Henrietta, a figure that we've already gotten before, but not quite given, I think, this treatment. This one really is a nicer looking of the two. It still is something where I feel like the paint could have been upped just a little bit. I appreciate the gruesome goriness of the decayed body here, but I think adding a little bit of that wet slickness to the rest of her body could have really added and just beefed it up a little bit. And it's funny that I would say beefing it up. But adding that little bit of slick kind of sheen to the rest of the body could have given it as much as the sweaty, gross look that her head was already sporting. I like the interchangeable head. It's not as adjustable as I had hoped, but that's unfortunately the problem when it comes to the broader neck. The wireframe inside just can't bend as much as one would hope. A nice all-around looking figure, very gruesome to put on display, as one would expect to get when it comes to NECA and Ash and Evil Dead figures. There's generally going to be gruesome figures, and Henrietta definitely takes the cake. If I had a medal for most gruesome figure reviewed on this channel, I probably would give it to Henrietta here. Formerly, the former winner, by the way, would have been the previous Henrietta. And this probably will be then trumped if we get another Henrietta, but I don't think we'll get another one. This one, I think, gets as good as it could get, and definitely delivers everything I would want from Henrietta. Today we were having a look at the new NECA toys, Ash vs. the Evil Dead. I already said her name already a whole handful of times, but we were looking at Henrietta. Now with a new display stand, still as gross as ever. If you haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, make sure you do so. We're going to have a look at the one other figure from the Ash vs. the Evil Dead series, and of course many more figure reviews will be coming your way as well. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.